Samantha hired Malik to fake an engagement and save a $50 million inheritance. Then the board's letter arrived, denied. As her mother slid a check across the table to buy him off, Malik squeezed Samantha's hand and stood. "Mrs. Vale, there's one thing your trust can't buy." And then he did the one thing none of them saw coming. Samantha Vale's penthouse watched over Central Park like a patient queen. Gleaming kitchen steel, Italian leather that sighed when you sat, and floor-to-ceiling glass that caught the city's autumn light and poured it across everything she owned. At 32, Samantha owned a luxury event firm that could silence a ballroom with a single orchid arrangement. And yet the thing silencing her tonight wasn't beauty or power. It was a text from her mother, glowing on her phone like a summons. Board meeting moved to Thursday. Grandfather's trust requirements still in effect. Hope you have good news about your personal life, Mother. 17 missed calls preceded that line. 17 little alarms. Samantha set the phone face down on the marble island and tried to breathe past the pressure in her chest. Her reflection followed her in the glass, thick, curvy, unapologetically feminine. She'd spent years learning how to dress her body like an asset. Sculpted velvet, strategic silk, necklines that walked the line between boardroom and ballroom. Men admired, women measured, clients trusted. She had learned to turn every gaze into leverage, except the gaze of her own family. $50 million, she whispered, half a prayer, half a curse. The Vale Trust, constructed in another century by a man who believed women were fine as long as a husband held the reins, would unlock only if Samantha married before her 33rd birthday. 6 months. The clause used words like stability and good standing, but everyone knew what it really meant. Marry into the club or don't come in at all. Her assistant had left hours ago, delighted by quarterly figures and a pair of gigantic bookings that could have carried them through the season. But profit didn't sue the clause written by ghosts. Samantha poured herself a glass of Pinot and stared at the line of city lights threading the park. She was good at problems that required logistics and aesthetics, how to warehouse 10,000 roses without bruising a petal, how to turn an aircraft hangar into Versailles for a streaming magnate with 3 ex-wives. She was less good at problems that invaded the bloodstream. Her phone rattled. Mother. Samantha swiped and braced. "Darling," Margaret Vale said, voice wrapped in satin and steel. "I'm relieved you picked up. I didn't want to trouble you at the office." "You never trouble me, Mother," Samantha said, a reflex, an old choreography. "The board will expect reassurance. I've spoken with the Alcotts. Richard is divorced now. He's expressed interest. You two always got on." Samantha closed her eyes. Richard Alcott had once cornered her at a charity gala and explained how he liked his women manageable. She'd smiled, pivoted, and secured a 6-figure donation from his father out of sheer spite. "We didn't get on," she said, keeping her tone even. "We collided." "You're a practical woman," Margaret said softly, dangerous as a velvet-lined box. "The trust is not a social preference. It is the foundation of your company's future." "My company's future comes from my work." And I heard the flare in my voice. She softened it. "I'll handle it." After she hung up, the silence in the penthouse felt judgmental. Samantha finished her wine and opened her laptop. Logic assembled itself like scaffolding. The trust required a marriage. Marriage required a fiancé. A fiancé required either love, which she didn't have time to cultivate, or performance, which she knew how to direct better than anyone. She typed, deleted, retyped. Professional actor needed for short-term engagement. Must be comfortable at high society events, galas, boardrooms, fundraisers. Excellent compensation, discretion essential. Her hands hovered over the keys. The problem wasn't just discretion, it was proximity. Everyone in her orbit knew everyone else. The city felt large until you moved inside it like a veil. Then it shrank down to a glittering cul-de-sac. Anyone she plucked from her usual circuit would be recognized before the oysters were served. She added one more line. Seeking someone outside my usual social circle for authenticity. She stared at the words until her heartbeat settled. They were practical. They were also a quiet act of rebellion she didn't examine too closely. By morning, her inbox was a small parade. Headshots, reels, polite cover notes that ranged from charming to tragic. Her HR brain took over. She shortlisted 12, scheduled back-to-back auditions for Friday in the conference room that made grown executives sit up straighter. On Friday, the city stormed and then forgot it had. Autumn rinsed the sky clean. Samantha arrived early, hair pinned into a glossy twist, a dark emerald dress shaping her waist and hips the way a sculptor works in soft stone. She placed chilled water at each chair and opened a legal pad to a fresh page titled Candidates. Control made her breath slow. Ritual made it steadier. The first 8 men were variations on a theme. Earnest, clean-cut, classically trained, charming in the way of people who expect your approval and work hard to earn it. They hit their marks. She wrote competent and underlined it twice. Number 9 forgot his sides and tried to improvise Shakespeare. She wrote no so hard the pen nearly tore the page. Number 10 entered like a tide rolling in, quiet, inevitable. He was tall, long-limbed, the lines of his charcoal suit reading as intention rather than costume, skin rich as espresso, a neat fade, a watch that knew he knew value but didn't worship brand names. He met Samantha's eyes, and something behind her breastbone went still. "Miss Vale," he said, warm baritone with city edges, "thank you for seeing me." "Thank you for coming, Mr. Carter," I said, hating the formality in my voice and unable to shed it. I gestured to the seat opposite. "Tell me about your experience." 10 years of stage, he said, not performing the words, just inhabiting them. Classical and contemporary. Some television when the rent insists. Corporate training gigs, leadership, communication, conflict resolution. I've worn tuxedos in rooms where everyone had an opinion and no one had a clue. My mouth twitched. "Comfortable with high society events, then?" "I'm comfortable with people," he said. "Events are just people wearing shinier armor." I shouldn't have liked that as much as I did. I flipped a page. The role would require public displays of affection appropriate to an engaged couple. Hand-holding, a kiss for the camera on occasion. He absorbed that without flinch or fluster. "Clear boundaries?" "Mutually agreed," I said. "Always." He nodded once, as if I had passed a test he'd placed in front of me. "Timeline?" 6 months, possibly less if certain milestones are met. He didn't ask about money, which was unusual and somehow reassuring. Instead, why a performance instead of a partner? The question should have felt invasive. It landed like care. Because the trust cares about optics, not intimacy, and I refuse to confuse the two on a deadline. "Fair," he said. No pity in the word, no mockery, just assessment. "What's at stake?" "My company," I said simply. 47 employees, 3 major contracts pending. If the board decides I'm unstable, they'll slow walk everything. We'll bleed out while they deliberate. He sat back slightly, hands relaxed on the table, gaze steady. "All right. Then the job isn't to fool a room. It's to build the story strong enough to carry weight." "My thoughts exactly," I said. A coil of tension loosened in my spine. I slid a slim folder across the table. A proposed engagement story. Dates, places, mutual friends fictionalized just enough to deflect curiosity. He skimmed it, mouth curling at the edges once or twice, like a man hearing a tune he could already hum. He closed the folder and said, "I have one request. We add a clause about mutual respect. I'm not interested in playing hired help in my own narrative." Heat stung the back of my neck, not embarrassment at the request, but recognition that I'd build a life where such a clause needed stating. "Done," I said. "And one request from me. When the performance becomes too heavy, you tell me. We stop. No pretend at the cost of your peace." His eyes softened just enough to register. "Done." I didn't realize I had been holding my breath until I stood and offered her my hand. He rose, and the room felt smaller around him, like confidence took up physical space. "Welcome to the production, Mr. Carter," I said. "Happy to co-direct, Ms. Vale," he replied, palm warm against hers. Grounding, not possessive. When he left, the conference room exhaled, as if it too had been waiting. Alone again, Samantha looked down at her note. She'd written one word in the margin without noticing. Real. Her phone chimed. Mother again. She let it go to voicemail and watched the sun slip toward the park, the trees catching fire one leaf at a time. Somewhere below, the city rehearsed its nightly performance. Up here, a different story had begun, one she hadn't dared write because it asked too much of her and might give even more back. 6 months, she thought. A marriage clause. A man who looked at her like she was a person first and a problem never. "Okay," she said to the glass and the city and the ghost of a robber baron who had never met a woman like her. "Let's see who's directing whom." The contract signing took place in a midtown office that smelled faintly of leather and precedent. Samantha chose the space for a reason. It reassured her that everything in her life could be drafted, witnessed, and filed until even the risky parts looked respectable. Her attorney, Noah Sterling, arranged the documents in military lines: NDA, timeline, public appearance schedule, emergency protocol, while Malik stood at the window, hands in his pockets, watching the city braid itself into rush hour. "Standard confidentiality," Noah said, tapping the first page. "Mutual non-disparagement. Compensation in 3 installments tied to the appearance calendar in the board meeting. Exit clause for either party with 72 hours notice." "Add a clause on mutual respect," Malik said calmly, turning from the glass. "No speaking about each other as staff or property. No decisions about public intimacy without consent in the moment." Noah glanced at Samantha. She felt the prickle of recognition again, that she had built a world where such requests were necessary. "Yes," she said. "Add it." "And one more," Malik said, voice still even. "If the work starts to eat us, we say so, plainly. I'm not doing theater that swallows people." Samantha's mouth curved despite herself. "Agreed." They signed. Noah shook hands. The notary stamped circles of finality. Somewhere in the roar of elevators and city traffic, the production went live. When they stepped back onto Madison Avenue, Samantha felt a tremor under the smoothness she wore like silk. Malik noticed. He noticed everything. "Coffee? We should set our story while the ink's warm." They found a corner booth in a cafe with matte black brick and a chalkboard menu that tried too hard. Samantha ordered iced oat milk something. Malik took his espresso like a decision. She placed a folder on the table, dates they had met, the fundraiser they had both worked, a handful of mutual friends from real places with names changed just enough to be plausible without being verifiable. "Let's trade details we can carry without thinking," he said, sliding into the seat beside her, not across, like a partner, not an opponent. "Favorite places, pet peeves, stories that ring true even if the nouns changed?" "Favorite place? The park after the first snow, when the city forgets itself long enough to be quiet." He smiled at that, slow and appreciative. "Food? I live for good bread and soft butter, and anything with lemon." "Good. I'll make you lemon pasta before the first gala. Anchovies or no?" "Maybe," she said, surprised by the casual future tense, how easily he placed himself in her kitchen. "Pet peeves, people who confuse cruelty for sophistication. Also, men who announce what women should be." "Noted," he said. "I leave my announcements in coat check." He gave her his own markers with the same uncluttered frankness. Brooklyn-born and stubborn about it, father taught history, mother did night shifts into clinic, and still found time to make Sunday food that could fix a week. 2 younger sisters who terrify me in the best ways, acting because it wakes me up, Consulting because the rent does not care about art. Samantha wrote none of it down. She knew she wouldn't forget. "What do you want out of this, beyond a paycheck?" she asked. "Practice telling the truth inside a lie, and the pleasure of working with someone who knows the difference." Her laugh surprised them both. "We should rehearse the easy things," she said. "Hand on my back. How we look at each other in rooms full of cameras." He held out his hand. She took it. No performance yet, just the geometry of two palms learning each other's language. He lifted her knuckles, not to kiss, but to consider, asking without speaking whether the moment asked for more. "Not here," she breathed, aware that the cafe was full of eyes. But yes to the thought. "Rhythm, then. When we're in public, I'll check in with a question only you can hear. Okay? If you squeeze once, that's yes. Twice means stay close, no kiss. 3 means get me out. 3 is the fire drill. Copy." They spent an hour building the small scaffolding of a relationship. Inside jokes, who spilled wine on whom at the fundraiser, which book she teased him for never finishing. When they stood to leave, he placed a steady hand at the small of her back and guided her through the cluttered aisle. The touch looked casual, proprietary in the way that signaled couple to anyone watching. It felt like safety. The next day became fittings because optics, because New York. Samantha's tailor, a master of illusion, measured Malik with the quiet awe of a craftsman who delights in perfect raw material. Jackets draped like sentences that already knew their endings. Samantha, who had long ago learned how to armor her voluptuous body in lines that made rooms forget to blink, let herself enjoy how he looked at her. Not cataloging, not consuming, seeing. "You choose the ring," she told him afterwards, in a small Nolita boutique that specialized in subtle rebellion. Ethical stones, unusual settings. He took his time. He asked the jeweler about provenance, cut, the vulnerable history inside diamonds that pretend to be simple. In the end, he picked a warm oval in a slender gold bezel. Quiet, honest, undeniably beautiful. When he slid it under her finger, the air shifted. A stranger in the shop smiled. Samantha felt a pinch behind her ribs that was not panic. "Looks like it was waiting for you," he said. "It looks like it doesn't need to shout to be heard," she replied. They scheduled their soft opening, brunch in Soho where photographers grazed like pigeons. Samantha wore a cream sweater that loved her curves and high-waisted trousers that did what she asked. Malik wore a navy jacket, open at the throat, and an expression that said, "Try me and bring your best." They walked hand in hand past windows full of things that solved nothing, pausing to let an older couple pass. A young woman recognized Samantha and whispered to a friend, phone already rising. "Okay," Malik said under his breath. Samantha squeezed once. He bent to kiss her cheek. It landed like punctuation, chaste enough for brunch, intimate enough to set the angle of a lens. They ate shakshuka and laughed about nothing. He told a story about blowing a line on stage and making the mistake bigger until it became the joke. She told one about a billionaire's daughter who wanted live swans in a ballroom and how she'd negotiated down to origami. When they stepped back into the street, the first blog post already existed somewhere, a caption searching for a story. That night, Samantha's phone vibrated with the incoming tide. "Vanessa, you could have told me." "Mother, call me." A junior publicist from a lifestyle magazine. "Feature idea? Power couples who give back." Samantha silenced everything except Malik's text. "Debrief?" he wrote. "My place, at 8. I'll make the pasta if you bring the anchovies." The penthouse smelled like lemon and something richer when he arrived. He moved easily in her kitchen, as if they'd worked this line before. The tilt of a pan, the soft hiss of garlic. She leaned on the counter, hip curved, ring catching the city lights. "You cook like you talk. Patient, certain. You move like you own the room, and you do." They ate at the island, knees almost touching, reviewing the day like producers. What landed, what to shift, which smiles were ammunition and which were invitations. When they finished, he washed, she dried, and the silence that followed felt less like absence and more like space. "Tomorrow," she said, "we meet my stylist, then walk through the Met for route and light.
After that media coaching in case anyone tries to corner us with questions. And then what? He asked. Then, she said, feeling the tremor again, but naming it now, we do the first real performance, the Met Gala. He watched her for a beat. Okay? He asked, the word now theirs. She lifted his hand and squeezed once, twice. Yes, stay close. Close, he repeated, and the word dismantled something tight in her chest. When he left, the city stretched across the windows like possibility. Samantha studied the ring, the shadow his presence had left in the room, the outline of a life she had written for strategy and was beginning to inhabit like truth. Her phone lit again. Vanessa, you could have told me. Mother, call me. A junior publicist from a lifestyle magazine. Feature idea? Power couples who give back. Samantha locked the screen, set the phone face down, and touched the place where Malik's hand had warmed the small of her back earlier, as if proof could be pressed into skin. Okay, she told the empty room, feeling the shape of the word from the inside out. Outside, a siren threaded the night, a reminder that New York loved a spectacle. Inside, in the life she had storyboarded, something unscripted took a breath. The Met waited. The cameras would too. She was ready to give them a show, and for the first time, to see what might show itself back.
The afternoon light at the Met turned the steps into a pale river. Cameras pooled at the banks, lenses glittering like schools of fish. Samantha took Malik's arm at the curb and felt him match her breath. Inhale 4, exhale 4, the steadying count they'd practiced in her kitchen between lemon zest and boiling water. The driver opened the door. The night opened with it. Her gown was midnight silk that understood her body intimately. Cinched waist, deep neckline that honored her full bust without apology. A slit that let the dress move with her hips instead of against them. She'd chosen velvet heels the color of expensive wine. The ring, warm oval, slender bezel, caught the last streaks of sun and threw them back subtle as a secret. Malik in a black tuxedo was geometry made human. Crisp lapel, clean line, tie precise, posture relaxed in a way that signaled strength rather than indifference. Okay, he murmured, the question small enough to fit behind her ear. She squeezed his fingers once. Yes. They took the first step together, then the next, their pace unhurried, letting the cameras find them rather than chasing the flash. Heads turned like wildflowers toward light. An influencer in a dress made of mirrored squares whispered, "That's her," and a ripple of recognition moved through the crowd. Samantha smiled for the lenses the way a conductor smiles at an orchestra, contained, assured, inviting focus without begging for it. "Miss Vale, over here. Who's your date? Name? Ring? Are we celebrating something?" "Fiancé," Samantha said calmly, turning her left hand so the ring caught the light. "Malik Carter." A few photographers blinked as if a page in their mental scrapbook had turned the wrong color. It lasted half a second, then the shutters resumed their frantic applause. Malik lifted his hand in a small, friendly wave. His other palm rested at the small of her back, an anchor anyone could see. Inside, the great hall breathed cool and vast. Marble columns, chandeliers, the quiet roar of money disguised as culture. Samantha's stylist had mapped their route earlier, where the pause, which spot bent light kindly, which corner offered escape if talk turned feral. They moved through the hall like a current that knew its destination, stopping to greet donors, museum board members, the odd celebrity who wanted to be seen being gracious. Vanessa Grant appeared near the Temple of Dendur in a column of blush silk, smile lacquered, eyes bright with the hunger that lives in people who think information is currency they own. She air-kissed both of Samantha's cheeks, then regarded Malik with the gentle skepticism some people reserve for modern art. "You didn't tell me," Vanessa said, voice pitched for the circle that had already tightened around them. "I'm telling you now," Samantha replied, pleasant, an iron filament inside the tone. "Malik," Vanessa said, extending her hand, "old friend of Sam's." "Pleasure," he said, shaking her hand with easy warmth. No overcompensation, no shrinking. "I've heard stories." "I hope only the flattering ones," Vanessa laughed. "How did you two meet?"
Before Samantha could deploy their line, Malik answered with a softness that sounded unscripted, even though they had workshopped it over espresso. At a literacy fundraiser, she was running the room like a symphony. I wanted to be useful. She told me where to stand and who needed water. We made fun of a billionaire's tie. The rest kept happening. Vanessa's smile tightened a millimeter. Charming. What do you do, Malik? He do two things, well enough to pay New York rent: acting and organizational consulting. Oh! Vanessa lifted her brows as if she'd discovered a smudge on glass. Consulting for organizations, he said, not unkindly. Teams who say they want to change and need help meaning it. Samantha felt a bubble of laughter press against her ribs. Malik's refusal to contort himself to fit someone else's hierarchy wasn't a performance, it was a boundary that radiated as presence. She watched Vanessa weigh him, watched her choose confusion over curiosity, watched the tiny calculation that said, "Not one of us." Samantha sipped champagne that tasted like a decision. A patron in a tuxedo the color of wet stone materialized, Roy Harlan, hedge fund oracle and professional backpatter. "Samantha, darling," he said, eyes taking inventory of her gown, her cleavage, the ring, Malik. "New face." "My fiancé, Malik," she said. "Roy chaired the sculpture acquisition committee last year." "Mm-hmm," Roy said, extending a hand he had not washed since shaking 5 other donors. "And what line are you in, son?" Samantha felt the word son bark against her skin. Malik smiled a smile that wasn't a weapon, but knew where the exits were. "Lines," he said. "Some nights I speak them. Most days I help companies redraw them so people can cross without getting tripped." Roy's knuckles bumped a handshake that didn't soften for him. "Useful," Roy said, failing to disguise surprise. "Very modern." They eased away, Malik's palm finding the small of her back again, that same tempo, steady and intimate. "Okay?" he asked. She squeezed him 2 times. "Stay close." Close tightened into sanctuary in the medieval wing, a shadowed corridor where the sound of the party dulled into velvet. Samantha rested one hand on a cool stone lintel, the other on Malik's lapel, fingertips memorizing the grain of fabric. "You're doing beautifully," she said. "So are you," he replied, eyes searching her face for microfractures. "You're not hiding." "Not tonight," she said, surprising herself with how easy truth felt. "Not with you here." He brushed a stray hair from her shoulder, the gesture so gentle it made her chest ache. No kiss yet. They'd agreed to save that for a moment that felt like their choice, not the room's. The room swallowed them and kept walking. At dinner, Samantha was placed between a tech founder, who talked about Mars as if Earth had personally offended him, and a socialite who collected contemporary women painters the way some people collect handbags, earnest, expensive, oblivious. Malik took the seat on her left, a buffer that absorbed and harmonized as needed. When the tech founder insisted that diversity is a pipeline problem, Malik smiled with all his teeth and asked, voice smooth as river rock, "A pipeline you built?" The table laughed, the kind of sound that lets people reframe their certainty as a joke. Samantha squeezed his knee under the table in thanks, a private semaphore that registered in his eyes before it faded from his face. Midway through dessert, the museum president made his rounds. "Ms. Vale, your firm's touch was everywhere in the garden last month. Stunning work. And this must be my fiancé, Malik Carter." The president glanced at the ring, then at Malik, and recalculated in real time. "Congratulations to both of you," he said warmly. Sincere or practiced, it landed soft. Samantha decided to take it as sincere. Some performances, after all, did their own good. When the band struck a standard that had seduced couples for 3 generations, Malik stood and offered his hand. "One circuit," he said, "so the people at home know we're not afraid of music." She rose, grateful to be moved. On the floor, he led lightly, fingertips a suggestion, palm a promise. Samantha let herself follow, not because she needed directing, but because following, like leading, can be an act of strength when you choose it. They turned under chandeliers that could have funded a library. She rested her cheek near his jaw and smelled pine and pepper and the unhurried soap of an adult man who did not borrow his scent from a department store campaign. "Tell me something true," he murmured. "I like my body best when it's working hard." planning an impossible load-in, dancing, not apologizing. "Noted," he said. And in that one word she heard, "I see you, not just what you walk into a room wearing." They exited through a side door when the speeches began their usual self-congratulation. The museum steps were slick with night, a light mist dusted Samantha's shoulders. The driver pulled up on cue, windows gloved in privacy. Inside the car, the city was a reflection in glass. Samantha watched herself settle, watched Malik lean back and unclasp his cuff, and watched both of them exhale like divers breaching. "Debrief?" he asked. "Vanessa will call. Mother will not. She'll summon. The Roys of the world will learn new words for useful, or choke on old ones." She laughed, a sound tired and light at the same time. "I didn't flinch. You didn't. You owned." The car eased into traffic. Samantha turned her hand so the ring glowed faintly and rested her palm on his thigh, not for show now, just because the space belonged to them. He covered her hand with his and kissed her knuckles. No audience, no script, just two people in a moving room making a choice. Her phone lit up as they reached her building. "Mother, breakfast, 8 a.m., private club, bring him." "Vanessa, call me now." "A board liaison, chair would like to schedule a preliminary conversation Wednesday." She looked at Malik, at the kind gravity of his face, at the way the tux couldn't blunt his softness. "Okay?" he asked, that word now a bridge they could cross even in the dark. She squeezed once. "Yes." "Tomorrow," she said, pocketing the phone, "we meet the wolves." "And then?" he asked. "Then," she said, leaning in, finally to press her mouth to his, soft, deliberate, not chaste, not loud, "we teach them to read a new story." When they broke apart, his smile was slow and surprised.
"Okay," he breathed, as if he'd been holding that yes in his chest all night. The car door opened. The night exhaled cool air and the smell of rain on stone. They stepped out together, shoulders level, hands joined. Not props now, not armor. The city watched, as it always did. For once, Samantha didn't mind. The private club hid itself behind brass and quiet. Oil portraits watched from velvet walls, and sunlight arrived through leaded glass already groomed. Samantha had grown up in rooms like this, rooms that trained you to speak in lowered tones and accept that the carpet cost more than a teacher's salary. She walked in beside Malik, her hand looped in the crook of his arm, the ring catching a thin beam of morning light. Heads turned, the way hedges bend in a breeze. Margaret Vale sat at a corner table with a view of the room and every exit, a porcelain cup poised in a hand that never trembled. Her navy sheath dress matched the blue vein of the china. She rose, smiling with the precision that told Samantha how long the smile would last. "Darling," Margaret said, air-kissing Samantha's cheeks, "you look radiant." She turned to Malik. "Mr. Carter, thank you for joining us." "Mrs. Vale," Malik said, offering his hand. "Thank you for the invitation." They sat. A server materialized with coffee and a silver basket of breads Samantha had loved as a child and learned to refuse as an adult. Margaret did not waste time. "The board meets on Wednesday," she said. "They will want to be reassured." "About what?" Samantha asked, keeping her voice even. "Suitability," Margaret replied, gently, smoothing an invisible crease from the tablecloth. "A marriage is not only a matter of affection, it is an alignment of families, values, positions." "Positions?" Malik asked mildly. "Standing," Margaret said, meeting his eyes. "You understand. The trust requires that the marriage be..." A precise pause. "Appropriate." Samantha felt the word land like dust in her mouth. "Appropriate to whom?" "To the intentions of your great-grandfather, to the expectations of our board, to the community that has supported your company since its inception." "Mother," Samantha said, "my company survives because we deliver miracles on time, not because a club approves of my dinner companion." "Your company survives," Margaret said softly, "because we made sure the right doors opened for you." Malik's gaze flicked to Samantha. "Okay?" She squeezed his knee under the table once. "Yes." Margaret folded her hands. "Tell me about yourself, Mr. Carter. Your family, your education, your plans." My father taught history, my mother was a nurse. Brooklyn raised me. I act, I consult. My plans generally involve building where I stand. You consult, Margaret echoed. With what firm? Independent, Malik said. Teams call when the story they're telling themselves stops working. And you imagine, Margaret said, the smile steady as a metronome, that such work prepares you for the scrutiny of a board like ours, for a life lived on our stage? Malik's voice stayed smooth. What prepares a person for a life is the life they've already lived. Samantha tasted pride like citrus on her tongue. She put her cup down. Mother, you didn't bring us here to taste the croissants. Margaret's smile flickered, then reset. I brought you here because I love you and because I understand consequences. There is still a practical path. Richard Alcott remains available. No, Samantha said, quiet but absolute. That door's closed. Doors reopen, Margaret murmured. Not this one. Not if I have to pry it off its hinges myself. For the first time, Margaret looked tired, older almost, a hairline crack in porcelain. You are choosing difficulty. I am choosing myself, Samantha said, and a partner who respects that. Margaret turned to Malik, the softness gone. Mr. Carter, people like us survive because we recognize when we are outmatched. I am offering you the truth. This will not end the way you want it to. He ends, I'm not asking it to end my way, only honestly. The server returned with plates none of them would finish. Conversation stalled in the way of people who have said the necessary parts and discovered there is more necessary still. When the meal ended, Margaret rose first. Wednesday, she said, kissing Samantha's cheek again, letting her perfume do most of the comforting. To Malik, she offered a nod designed to feel like a verdict. Good day. They walked out into a city already boiling with errands. Samantha exhaled so sharply she surprised herself. Are you okay? Malik asked. She gave him 2 squeezes, stay close, and leaned her shoulder against his arm as they moved down the steps. She thinks she's saving me. He's saving the story she knows. You're writing a new one. The law firm where the board convened used mahogany like a language. A receptionist with perfect posture escorted them past a row of black and white photographs of men who once believed themselves immortal. The conference room door stood open like a mouth. 5 board members waited. Edmund Vale, her great-uncle with a banker's spine, Charles Whitmore, whose cufflinks could buy a mid-size car, Lila Davenport, a theater philanthropist who rarely spoke but remembered every word she ever heard, Arthur Lim, precise, kind eyes, dangerous mind, and Jonathan Pierce, whose smile never reached his pupils. Miss Vale, Edmund said, standing. Thank you for coming. And this must be... My fiancé, Malik Carter, Samantha said, and felt the word fiancé steady her like a handrail. They shook hands. Some grips were warm, some weighed. They sat. Papers rustled. Water glinted. Congratulations, Lila said, softly. A happy occasion. Thank you, Samantha said, meaning it. Charles folded his hands. You understand, of course, that the trust was written with certain assumptions. Assumptions often outlive their usefulness, Malik said, tone so pleasant the sentence couldn't be called what it was, a challenge. Jonathan adjusted his tie. The trust's criteria referenced families of comparable background, education, and standing. We must determine whether this match aligns. Background, Arthur repeated, as if the word might confess to something. Background, standing, education. Perhaps we could begin with the easiest, Mr. Carter. I was educated by a public school teacher at my dinner table and by a nurse who could do math in the margin of exhaustion. Formerly, I trained in theater. Professionally, I advise organizations on change. Change into what? Edmund asked. Something truer than what they were pretending to be. Lila's mouth curved, the ghost of a smile. And your finances? Private, Malik said, though I can assure you I'm not a threat to your balance sheet. Jonathan's smile thinned. We require more than assurance. You require obedience, Samantha said, feeling heat lick up her sternum. Let's be honest about what this is. Edmund's gaze sharpened. This is the stewardship of a legacy, Samantha.
My legacy is the company I built, the employees I pay, the work I deliver, not the prejudice a dead man wrote into a document. Silence arrived and sat down. Arthur interlaced his fingers. No one here is your enemy. Then listen, Samantha said. I'm not a debutante you can trade. I'm a CEO asking whether you will fund the work you claim to value or withdraw it because my fiancé doesn't look like he belongs on your Christmas card. Jonathan cleared his throat. No one is discussing appearance. Then what are we discussing? Malik asked, still calm. Because so far I've heard background, standing, education, words that behave when you need them to imply what you don't want quoted. Edmund inhaled, slow. We will deliberate and respond within 7 days. On what basis? Samantha asked. On the basis of the trust, Edmund said, the words as heavy as the table. They stood. Polite phrases were exchanged like business cards no one would ever call. At the door, Lila paused beside Samantha. Courage, she murmured. It ages well. Outside, in the elevator, Samantha pressed her palm flat against the cool mirror and breathed. Malik put his hand above hers, not trapping, just covering, the way you shield a flame when wind comes hunting. I wanted to scream, she said. You didn't. You carved. They're going to say no, she whispered, her throat working around it. Maybe, maybe not. Don't do that, she said, meeting his eyes in the reflection. Don't make it smaller so I'll feel better. He nodded, accepting the rebuke. Okay, he said softly. They might say no. If they do, we choose anyway. They stepped out onto the street. The city had rotated a degree while they were inside. Afternoon angling toward evening, shadows lengthening into invitation. Samantha's phone buzzed. Mother, dinner tonight, family only. Another message chased it. Board liaison. Thank you for your time. Decision in 7 days. 7 days. A week to rehearse every outcome and live through only one. They walked without destination, letting sidewalks make the decisions. At a corner bodega, Malik bought her a cold bottle of water and himself a tangerine. He peeled it as they walked, the scent bright as a promise, and handed her a section. She ate it and felt something unclench. Tell me something true, he said. I'm afraid of losing what I built, and I'm more afraid of losing myself to keep it. He looked at her then like the answer was worth the walk. Here's something true back. You didn't bring me into this to protect your money. You brought me because some part of you knew you deserved a witness. The word struck her with the gentle
Accuracy of a surgeon's blade. Witness. Not savior, not shield. Witness. The person who sees you and refuses to look away. They reached her building as the sky decided between gold and blue. In the elevator, she leaned into him, breath against the knot of his tie. Okay? He asked. One squeeze. Yes. In her penthouse, she toed off her heels and dropped her bag like she was setting down a weapon. He loosened his cuffs, found 2 glasses, poured water like it mattered. They sat on the couch, city beyond them, silence between them measured and kind. 7 days, she said. 7 days, he echoed. And if they say no? She asked. Then we light a different path, he said. Not because we like hardship, because we like truth. She leaned back, turned her left hand, watched the ring catch dusk and refused to show off. I don't know how to do this without breaking something. Maybe something needs breaking, he said. Maybe the thing that breaks is what never fit. She put her head on his shoulder. His hand found the curve of her hip, not as a claim, but as a home. The city hummed. Down below, there would be headlines, whispers, negotiations. Up here, there was the quiet of 2 people calibrating courage. Okay? He asked again. A ritual now, unhurried. She lifted his palm and gave it 2 squeezes, stay close, and felt his breath answer. Outside, the evening settled like a curtain. Tomorrow would come with its summonses and costs. Tonight, they allowed themselves 1 hour off the clock, 1 hour to be exactly what they were, without rehearsal or audience. A thick, curvy women who had stopped apologizing, and a man who refused to translate himself for rooms that spoke only one dialect. A pair of beating hearts counting down 7 days, learning the steadiness of a word they could hold in their mouths when everything else asked for silence. Okay. On the 7th morning, the envelope waited like a verdict on Samantha's marble console. Heavy stock, embossed crest, the handwriting that had addressed her birthday cards as a child and her quarterly reports as an adult. She stood looking at it long enough for her coffee to go cold. Malik came from the kitchen with 2 slices of toast and the patience of someone who understood ceremonies that hurt. He set the plate down, took the envelope, and held it out. "Together?" he asked. She nodded. He slid a finger beneath the flap and opened it with the clean sound of paper surrendering. Samantha read once, then again, because neutrality is a language that hides knives. The board has determined that the proposed union does not meet the criteria established by the trust's original provisions. Alternative arrangements must be made within the remaining time frame to ensure compliance. No signature at the bottom, just names printed like monuments. Her throat closed, oxygen turned square. Malik didn't reach for her. He waited, a space she could step into if she chose. "Say it," she whispered, because truth landed better when it was not alone. "They said no," he said, plain as bread. Samantha exhaled and felt the tremor ride out on breath. She set the letter down and pressed her palms to the cool stone, counting to 4 the way they did before cameras. When she turned, Malik was there, hands open, the question already on his mouth. "Okay?" She took his right hand and squeezed 3 times. "Get me out." And he did, not out of the apartment, but out of the room in her head where old men sat at a long table deciding the price of her future. He made tea, he buttered toast. He talked about nothing for 3 minutes. How the neighbors' geraniums were thriving, how the doorman had a new puppy, how sunlight looked different in October. When the world softened enough to hold language again, he came back to the letter and set a gentle finger on its edge. "Tell me something true," he said. "I'm angry. Not just at them. At me. At all the years I learned the rules so well, I forgot they were optional." He nodded like she'd given him a map. "Here's truth back. You didn't lose yourself today. You found a door." Her phone vibrated. "Mother." Then again. Again. She let it sing to the counter twice and then answered. "Darling," Margaret said without greeting, "I received the board's message. Come to the apartment. We'll fix this." "There is no version of fix that includes Richard Alcott," Samantha said. A breath. Contained frustration. "I didn't say his name, but yes, an appropriate match remains a path. Your grandfather's language was explicit." "Your grandfather's language was a cage. I don't need to decorate it." "Then meet me," Margaret said, tone dropping to the register that had arranged donors and dismantled opponents. 1 hour. Samantha looked at Malik. He had already put on his jacket. "We'll both come," she said. Margaret Vale's apartment had always looked like certain sentences. "We were here before you, we will be here after you." She was waiting in the living room, spine unbent, hair immaculate, a crystal decanter refracting morning into orderly shards. "Samantha," she said. "Mr. Carter." "Mrs. Vale," Malik answered, polite because he chose to be, not because he had to be. Margaret gestured to the sofa. "I will be frank. I spoke to Jonathan. There is nothing to be done within the trust's framework. But your company can be preserved if we move quickly. We'll find a partner to acquire a majority stake. You'll retain title. After a respectable interval, you can revise your personal situation." Silence dropped into the room and stared up at them. "You're suggesting I sell my work to buy back your approval, and then sell my relationship to buy back your money?" "I am suggesting you stop a fire before it reaches the nursery. Love is lovely, but stability feeds employees, pays vendors, keeps promises. Stability that requires me to lie is not stability. It's compliance." She turned to Malik, eyes precise. "What do you want? Money? A job? We can make a suitable arrangement. Walk away now and you can do so with dignity." "Mother," Samantha said, voice rising. "Stop." Malik didn't move. "Mrs. Vale,
I understand the language of arrangements. I grew up watching people make them and call it love. What I want is simple. For your daughter to be allowed to stand in the life she built without bowing to a dead man's terms. If that costs us comfort, we'll make more. Comfort is renewable. Dignity is not. Margaret's face changed in a way Samantha had only seen twice, when her father left and when her grandmother died. Not a crack, an erosion, not collapse, conflict. You are very certain for someone without a chair at this table. We're building our own table. Malik smiled, not amused. Then understand the invoice. We do, Samantha said. She reached for Malik's hand because she wanted to, not because anyone was watching. And we'll pay it, in our currency. Margaret's gaze went to their joined hands. When she looked up, the tactic had changed. You love him, she said, not quite a question. Yes, I do, Samantha answered, surprised by how clean the word felt on her tongue. And you love her? Margaret asked Malik. Yes, he said, with the kind of certainty that made oxygen lighter. I do. Margaret looked out the window at a city that had always drawn its lines for her. Then you will need to say it out loud, she said, her voice different now. Less weapon, more weather. In this world, in front of people who think they own your definition. We will, Samantha said. She nodded once as if a machine had shifted gears. Then make your announcement at the Literacy Foundation Gala. The room will be full of those who judged you. It is efficient to teach them at once. Samantha blinked. She hadn't expected an assist. Mother? Your great-grandfather built the trust in a time that confused inheritance with character. I loved my father. I do not need to love his sentences. She smoothed her skirt, breathing in like it hurt. You will still lose the money. We'll survive the loss. We won't survive the lie. Margaret's eyes closed and opened. Then go write your truth on a wall they can't ignore. They married at City Hall on a Wednesday because vows don't care what the calendar says. Samantha wore a white suit that loved her curves and didn't ask permission. Malik wore a navy suit he'd keep forever. The clerk said their names like a blessing. A stranger cried. They kissed because they meant to, not because anyone demanded it. They stepped onto the sidewalk, 2 rings pale with newness, and the city clapped by accident. Buses hissed. A biker rang a bell. A kid yelled, "Congrats!" And then, "Can I have your cupcake?" Because a bakery was nearby and love looks like sugar at noon. That night, the Literacy Gala shimmered. Glass, linen, conversations tuned to wealth's favorite key. Samantha had planned this event months ago. Now she walked into it as a different noun. Vanessa intercepted at the entrance, eyes wide, mouth eager. You married? Without telling me? Vanessa said, half wounded, half hungry. Samantha smiled, the kind that chooses its own audience. I'm telling you now. On stage, the MC thanked donors and invoked children. Samantha took the microphone when the program eased toward dessert. The room hushed because it was trained to hush when money spoke. It didn't yet know that something truer was about to. Many of you know me as the woman who makes your glitter look like Grace, she began, light laughter breaking the surface. Tonight I want to talk about what stories do to us. She told them about trusts without using the word, about contracts that write people small, about the lies she agreed to by not naming them. She did not indict, she illuminated. Then she reached for Malik's hand, and together they stood in the light people usually rented for other purposes. This is my husband, Malik Carter. And the word husband rang through crystal like an unapologetic bell. We chose each other, not for safety, for truth. Silence. Then a seam of applause appeared. Thin at first, then growing, not unanimous, not performative. Staff clapped hardest. A few donors clapped like they were waking up from a long nap. Some didn't. It was all right. Not everything worth loving is unanimous. Afterwards, Jonathan Pierce approached with a face arranged for politeness and a mouth prepared for warning. Bold, he said. Necessary, Samantha replied. Costly, he added. Affordable, Malik said, and Samantha laughed because for the first time in weeks, the arithmetic of her life made sense. They left early, not in retreat, but because their evening had a better destination. In the car, she took his left hand and turned the band so it flashed City back at itself. Okay, he asked. She squeezed once. Yes. Then twice. Stay close. He said, always. She looked at the ring that had never needed to shout to be heard, at the man who had never asked her to shrink, and the life they had built out of a performance that refused to stay pretend. Somewhere far uptown, a conference room still held its table like a throne. Here, their kitchen held a different kingdom. 2 chairs, a pot to scrub, a window that faced a tree. Enough. Samantha stood, rounded the table, and slid into Malik's lap, because thick, curvy women have always known how to sit on thrones of their own making. She kissed him, slow and sure. "Tell me something true," she whispered against his mouth. He smiled. "Fake kisses make terrible scaffolding, but they can build a beautiful bridge if you don't."
"Stop it, pretend." She laughed, hat against his shoulder, and thought of the first time she'd said yes with a squeeze in a room full of cameras. The city outside kept performing. Inside, 2 people kept choosing. Love, it turned out, wasn't a trust fund. It was a practice, and they were very, very good at rehearsal.